Thanks, Leslie. Well, that last set of slides that Leslie showed sort of puts my age in perspective when you add to that Tim has declared that I was with BP for 34 years. We actually have another climate commissioner who can't make it today, Roger Beale, and he's older than me, and he can usually take the place of wisdom in our group. But so I have to be the dinosaur today. And it does make me reflect on what I have seen in, over 34 years in business. I actually started with BP in New South Wales, and my first job, believe it or not, was running a depot in Nowra, just down the road. And when I think about that, and I think about how much BP has changed over that amount of time, it is a company that's just beyond recognition. And I think you'd find that when you think about most companies around in the world that still exist, that were around 35 years ago, they'd be totally different today to what they were back then. And that says to me that change is a constant, and those that survive and prosper, are the ones that actually manage change better. And I think a lot of that is being on the front foot. As far as my time in BP is concerned, BP was one of the companies that came out in the mid-90s and said, climate change is a significant business risk, and we should be doing something about it. We should be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So my involvement in this debate that's been going on for a long time now, does go back to the mid-90s, and I've given a lot of reflection over many years as to what sorts of things should business be looking for from government, and what government should be looking for from business to move this debate forward. And some of the things, and these are not rocket science. You'll have heard them in various forms over as the debate has evolved. But the one thing that does intrigue me, when I look at the debate today, is it seems to be carried out at sort of the opposite ends of the spectrum. So it's not a debate that is actually taking place in the centre, which is a little bit surprising when you think about what some of the realities are. So the reality is that we have bipartisan support for a 5% reduction below 2000 levels unilaterally. So that means, regardless of what happens in the rest of the world, that's what both sides of politics in Australia say that we must do by 2020. And so once you've established that, that's your target, that is what will set the cost. And the only debate then is, what is the lowest cost of getting there? And it is absolutely intriguing that we find that the debate has now opened up the total spectrum as though everything's up for grabs again. But actually the focus of our politicians is pretty narrow when you think about it. All they're talking about is the most cost-effective way of achieving the same target. So when you think about that and bring it back into the sort of the business context, and some of the noises you've heard from business, including people like myself over the last few years, is business does believe that we should have the lowest cost approach. The way that business operates believes that a market-based system is the way to deliver that. If you're going to have a market-based system, you need a price. And we believe that, generally in business, that price is the thing that drives things. So, for example, recently there was an issue with, a very significant issue with the supply of bananas. And what happened? The price went up as a result of the shortfall. And in fact, people actually ate a lot less bananas than they would have if the price had been down to down where it was in the past. Price does matter, and price has significant influence on business. So if you don't have a price on something, then you won't get any changes in behaviours. But if you actually impose a price on, and this is generically, on any form of externality, then in fact you'll provide a choice for businesses. They can either choose to mitigate it, or they can choose to continue with it and pay the price. And that flows all the way through to the end consumer. So you get some costs get passed on, and that then provides an incentive for households to reduce consumption and or make other responsible choices. And so ultimately you end up with a situation where a combination of businesses investing in new ways to reduce the amount of CO2 they put into the air or reduce demand, and you end up with a virtuous circle where in fact the pollution levels do ultimately come down, or the amount that we're putting into the atmosphere does come down. And it's for this you actually need a clear target to achieve that, and we do have this clear target going forward. So when we look at what business wants in the future out of this debate, ultimately business wants a very clear regulatory framework going forward. So we do have our 5 degrees, but the debate would suggest that there's no agreement out there. There's generally widespread agreement across the political spectrum on trade-exposed industries, and of course we have that very much here. It would be absolutely silly for Australia to destroy the competitiveness of businesses that would otherwise be very competitive by putting a weight on them that wasn't on their trade partners, and that's been recognised also across both sides of the political spectrum. So, the debate that's been going on is at the margin rather than, I'd suggest, rather than the substance of that. Both sides of politics talk about, a broad-based scheme, no silver bullet, and one of the analogies we've heard in one of the analogies that we've heard as we've gone around is you need silver buckshot, not silver bullets. And the reality is, whichever piece of wisdom you look at, there is no one silver bullet. It's going to take a broad-based approach to actually solve this problem globally. And it's not just an Australian issue. Australia will be able to do some things better than other countries and some things not as well. But it is something that's going to take a broad-based approach. There's no one thing that's going to solve it. And the other thing that business looks for, of course, is business can deal with sort of uncertainties of markets, but one thing business doesn't like is major discontinuities that occur through no foresight of their own. And the major discontinuities that business would be worried about would be, for example, if our energy security collapsed, if our power generation system didn't work anymore, if we couldn't get the supplies of energy that we needed because we'd taken something out without replacing it with something else. So that would be a big concern of business. But I think the other major discontinuity that could occur as far as business is concerned is if we actually start too late. So, as a businessman, I'd say that we need to make sure that we don't get left behind in this process of change and that we don't start too late. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks very much, Jerry, Will and Leslie. I'm just going to wrap up now and then take some questions. I think I have one slide here that I just want to talk about briefly. I mentioned that as we'd travelled around Australia, we had seen huge opportunities for regional communities as we move into this new clean energy economy. And those opportunities, by and large, have come from good, consistent policy. So in Mackay, for example, we met a sugar refiner. We visited a sugar refiner where they were doing it pretty tough. The international sugar market is not an easy one. They're selling into a global market. The Brazilians tend to have a very large share of that market. The value of the Brazilian currency has been declining as that of Australia has been appreciating, and things have got tougher and tougher. They've needed to diversify, and the mandated renewable energy target, again policy supported by both sides of politics, that aims to deliver 20% of our energy from renewable or clean resources by 2020, has opened opportunities for them. We saw that in the next 2 years or so, they'll be opening a power plant which uses bagasse, which is the waste product from sugarcane milling, to generate about a third of the electricity required by the town of Mackay, which is quite a significant opportunity for a business that was under pressure. It's those sort of opportunities I think that we need to see more of in future.